Good night, whenever you might be watching today's live. I am coming to you, as usual, from the basement here in Calgary, Alberta. I have my tea because, number one, I was up early. My daughter started swim practice this morning for the high school swim team because she's not active enough, so she needed to do this. So had to take her because she does not have her license. So I was doing that. Went for a walk, did some stitching, came home, but I need my tea. I am fighting a cold, the September sniffles that the kids all brought home. It's my turn with it. So on that note, I have chosen a bit of an easier block today. It was one that I was planning on doing for the end. It was going to be the final block. But my brain just can't do the block that I was planning on doing for today. It's, how shall I say it? It's not a hard block, but my brain just couldn't do it today. I needed to pick an easy block. So we're going with an easy block, but it's kind of the one that really turns our treasure map into a treasure map because it is ultimately X marks the spot. Right? That's why it made sense for the last block. But we're going to have fun. We're going to do it today. I'm going to continue to sip my tea in my favorite mug of a cockatoo eating fairy bread from Australia. It's my favorite mug. It's a good size, holds well, plus it's fun. So, what do we need for today's block? You basically need two fabrics. You need a background square, so whatever you want to use in your background. I'm continuing on with all of the beiges, my sandy sort of colors that I'm using for the background. I actually grabbed a handful more yesterday because I was running out. So now I have enough that I'll be able to finish the whole quilt top and then some. And then you need a color for the X. So really this is going to be kind of any color you want. I would pick something that fits with the map, with the other fabrics that you've chosen. I wanted to go with sort of a blue or a black to contrast with the sort of more, like if you look at my other blocks, you know, my volcano block kind of warm tones because it's sort of a browny gray, and the oranges. I used red on the path. What else have I done? You know, my booby trap block is golds and browns. So I really kind of wanted to have something that really marked it. I've just now realized as I look through this, my compass block, I did blues and grays. So now I'm questioning. I had picked a blue. And now I'm questioning, thinking I don't want a blue for it, because then I'm just kind of repeating what I did there. So I'm going to quickly grab, I had cut my background square and strips in a blue black, but I've changed my mind now that I've looked at my blocks again. See, if I had them up on the design wall, I would have noticed that, but conveniently my purple bin is out for a totally different project. So I'm going to grab purple instead, and have it be a bit of a contrast. I can pick this purple, which is actually really quite similar to the blue that I had, very similar in values, kind of a spotty scar or sky sort of print. Or I'm also looking at this batik, which could be fun, kind of fun too. I think I will go with the star print. There, that was easy. Easy fix. Sometimes you got to adapt on the fly. That's what improv is all about, right? Figuring it out as we go. So you need two fabrics. That's it. You could get fancier, but why? The whole point for today was that it be simple. Sometimes we need simple. So we have our two fabrics. I have cut a square of my background fabric. Now, how big of a square should you cut? I don't want this X to be giant in my quilt. I want it to be smaller than most of the other blocks, but I don't want it to be so small, right? So in my case, I cut my square at about 11 inches. It will shrink as we make the block, but it only will shrink so much depending on how wide you make your X. If you make very skinny strips for your X, your block is going to shrink a little bit. If you make very wide, your block actually may not shrink that much because you're adding that much to it. I actually am now looking at this again, thinking I might make it a little bit smaller. It doesn't need to be giant, right? It's just going to be the X marks the spot. So it doesn't need to be huge enormous, as my husband would make up that word. So let's get to it. I think I will trim my square down a little bit. I'm going to have to make sure I have it on the right side of the fabric because it's kind of one of those tone on tone prints. And then cut strips from my purple. So I'm going to bring you over here, have you ignore the mess of my sewing room. We'll flip you around. Nope. Flip you around so that you can see the table. Sorry, I gotta get more creative on this. The tripod's not set up properly as you look at my fingers. There we go. And I flipped you around again. You know, it's just how it goes sometimes. It's just how it goes. Again, see, apologies, my brain's not working. I'm going to put you down against my teapot while you watch me adjust things. My brain is not working today, clearly. So, we'll get you sorted. There we go. That's all I had to do. I don't know why my brain wasn't working today. Oh, right. The virus that's running through my system. That's why my brain's not working today. So let's flip you around. Which does it want to do? There we go. Oh my goodness. That was way more difficult than it needed to be, wasn't it? Okay. So we have our square. I'm going to actually trim mine down a little bit more. Doesn't have to be like a precise straight drawn square. That's why I'm just going to freehand cut these extra bits off the side. So put those with the scraps. They will get used, no doubt. And then I am going to cut strips from my purple. Now remember, when we're cutting strips, a couple of things. First of all, again, you don't need a ruler for these strips, but you want to make sure your strips are going to be long enough to go crosswise, right? I don't want just strips as tall as this. I want them to be long like that. So I'm just going to freehand cut an entire length. If it's not enough, I'll cut another one, but I'm pretty sure I'll have enough, especially because I made my square a little bit smaller. So this is what I mean. You need to be able to go corner to corner. And obviously, I've got quite a bit here. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to cut one strip and set the other one aside because we work one strip at a time. Now, we're going to do a little bit of flair, literally and figuratively, on this X. We can just go straight across, right? I can just go straight. In this case, I probably would take a ruler and layer my two fabrics right sides up, take a ruler and cut a nice straight line and sew it in. However, I want to add, as I said, a little bit of flair. So what I'm going to do is actually go back to our technique where we cut curves, which is also cut with right sides up, our fabrics layered together, right sides up, and I'm going to cut a little flare. And what I mean by that is I'm going to come in and I'm going to cut sort of a gradual curve on this one. And what that is going to do is it's going to create the notion of like a serif in a font. So for those of you who don't know, when we have fonts and we have a serif, let me grab something here, right? Let's look at my tea tin, which is serving as there. These are serif fonts in that they have these extra little bits on the ends, right? They kind of come out and it's a little bit of a flare. If it didn't have a serif, it would be more like these ones, just straight up and down. So I want my X to have a little bit of that serif kind of look. Is it exact? No, it's not. We're improving, right? But we're going to have that. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm lining up my fabric, not so much corner to corner with the strip like that. I actually want to see some of my corners on either end. And I have more fabric than I need. And I want to kind of trim some of that away. So to make that flat on the top and flat on the bottom. I'm not trimming it all away because things will shrink, but this is going to get confusing if we have these too much of this extra bit in there. So we're going to go ahead and have it this way. So we have it like that, again, layered right sides up. Now I'm going to go ahead and cut. Sorry, I'm just going to turn this so it's easier from my perspective. But what you're going to do is you're going to come in, and I'm going to come in. Let's zoom in just not that much. There we go. I'm going to come in and kind of just do this curve like that. So I don't want to do too much because number one, I don't want to run out of fabric. And number two, the stronger that curve, a little more difficult it will be to sew. So I want to have it on the top and the bottom. Now see, I missed a little bit here. Guess I'm getting at the point where I need to have a sharper rotary cutter. And we have that curve. So this is what you mean. This is what I mean by that little curve there. Then we're going to go ahead and we're going to sew that like we've sewn every other one of our curves along the way. So let me bring you over to the machine so you can see. There we go. Now I know what to do with my tripod. So we're going to do our fabrics. I'm going to sew it with the X on the bottom. So all I did was, and I'm sewing from left to right. So I'm going to pick it up here. You can't see that. I'm going to pick it up right here. I'm going to sew this bit first. Now, obviously, as I go to the machine, you see that it doesn't line up at all. We know now with our curves, it's not going to line up. And we're okay with that, right? If we can stop with our needle down, we will. We will pivot as necessary. If you went with a smaller X, you can reduce your stitch length a little bit to decrease the chance of puckers as you go. The key with all of this is that we're going to go slow and we are going to guide our fabric through. We don't want to rush and pull and stretch. All along the way. There we go. So I really only had that kind of stronger curve at the very beginning. I use my little spiders at the beginning and end of seams. And there we have that whole seam. So let's press that. We know we always press, cord in between. And I am going to, it wants to press towards my background. Just as I lay it on here, you can kind of see that it really wants to press towards the background. I don't want that though. You can, but because my background is so light, I want it to press towards the X. It's not really a huge difference. See, that's still one pass with the iron and it's going to work just fine. Okay, and that's the first one. Pretty straightforward, right? Now we're going to come back over here and we're going to make the next cut. So with this cut, I'm going to use that same background square. We are going to do the same thing, but to get that notion of the X, I want to do it in the opposite direction, right? So that I'm flaring out at the bottom. Now I'm already kind of flaring out here, but I want to accentuate that. So again, right sides up, right? I'm not too worried about lining things up. We will have to square this up. So I'm going to go in here. I want to make sure I don't come in so much that I have no background left underneath. And I've got that for my second cut. And then same thing, we're going to layer those fabrics. We're going to go right ahead and cut them or sew them. So I'll do this one real quick. It's the same technique, and this is a very gradual curve, so it should be pretty straightforward. And really, we are now halfway done our block because we only have 4 seams on this whole thing. So there we have it there. I'm going to go ahead, press that over here. Same thing, it wants to go out towards the background, but I'm going to force it to go towards the X. Just because that's a dark purple on a light, and I don't want to have any shadowing if I can avoid it. Plus then your X really kind of pops up from it. You can really use, with improv, with any piecing really, you can use your pressing direction to your advantage to kind of accentuate designs. And that's exactly what I'm doing here. Just a little extra press from the back, make sure everything is the way it should be. So we have our first one there. That was the easy one. Let's be honest. When we're making an X, the first one's the easy one. Okay, now we need to take our other strip and we're going to be crossing our X, right? So again, I'm going to trim off what I don't need just to keep from confusing myself and just having extra fabric in the way and everything. Now, from a design point of view, I have seen it. I haven't done it, but I've had students who've done this where they'll make this one straight just because they like the look of the curve with the straight one. They might make it skinnier. They might make it wide like this one is. I've cut my strips fairly wide so that I have room for the flare, right? But I am going to go ahead and do the flare on this one as well. So I need to rotate my block because I'm going to cut this one, and it's like, you don't want to be cutting at this like weird angle. So I'm going to rotate it so that I can cut because I have the camera here, but go in a way that makes sense to you. So again, I want to flare and come up like that. So that's what I'm going to do. And I'm cutting through all my layers like that. Remove that bit. And we're going to sew this piece to this piece. Okay. Just go ahead right away and sew that. Same thing as always. It's one of our typical curved pieces. Let me watch this one. Going into the machine like this. Again, we're guiding it through. No pinning because I'm only worrying about what's just in front at a time as I go. And then put my little spider in. And we have that one piece. Now, doesn't totally look like an X. It's the next step that really, really matters for making our X. So I'm going to go ahead and press it. This one kind of half wants to go to my X, half wants to go to the background. Again, I'm forcing the issue. There. there. So you can already see how I am getting smaller than how I started, which was good. Anticipate that your block's going to shrink a couple of inches between the seams and squaring up. So if you want a 10-inch blocks, make sure you start with a 12 and a half inch square background. I probably started with about 10 inches, so we'll see where it is. Now, here comes the important part when we are making an X block. I'm just going to change this angle for you. You see how if I just go ahead and I line up maybe sort of by eyeball my top and my bottom edge, look what happens with my X. The cross part doesn't line up at all. Not at all. Now, you may not care. This may totally work for you, and that's fine. I think it's one interesting design decision, right? However, I do want mine to line up, and you may want yours to line up. So we kind of have to move things around to make that happen. So did you see how I just slid that? And now these line up. But this doesn't line up, and neither does it here on that. So I've got to start playing with this a little bit, because there is a really easy way to make them line up a little bit more, but we need to kind of decide where we want this to be. If I go down here and I cut this piece as wide as it is, you see I'm going to lose when I go to square up. I'm going to lose all that flare I added in. Right? Because once I square up, I'm not going to have that. So you have a couple of choices. You could, if you really like the size that it is and you don't want to lose that flare, go ahead and add some more of your background so that you have more up here, right? So now if we go to square up, and then I can do the same thing down here, add a little piece of my white so that maybe it does kind of line up a little bit more. The other thing you can do is, see how I've got quite a wide bit of my X in here? I can kind of anticipate that I'm going to cut it narrower here. So I'm moving that around. I'm shifting it, right? This is where it started, and I'm going to shift it so that when I cut, I'm actually closer to here. So I want to make my cut here, and then I'm going to go along this line, excuse me, so that this piece is here. So I'm going to lose less of my flare. But you could do both too, right? I could add up here and add at the bottom on this piece. We're going to add it on the piece that we are sewing onto at this point before we cut, because it's really kind of a pain in the butt, if I'm being honest, to add these pieces after the fact. You want to do it now at this point while this piece is still free. You would go ahead and add something there. But I'm kind of okay with where it is. But I am just going to slide this up so it's a little bit skinnier in there. Again, I'm just rotating this because cutting wise, you want to cut safely. And so you will need to kind of move things around so that you can be cutting in a way that is safe for you. You never want to be cutting towards you. You don't want to be cutting at kind of weird angles, like this. So if I do it this way, because I'm standing just off the camera here, it's a nice safe way for me to cut. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. I'm going to see where I am for my flare here. And see, now at this point, I'm just going to follow the line that I have, and then I'm going to flare out again up there. So that's what I've cut along the way, right? So that I can sew that. So now that I've cut it, the other thing I want to do is if I just go ahead and sew this, when it finishes off, I could end up with a kind of really sort of wonky X again. You might like that. You might be totally fine with that, and that's okay. It's all a personal design decision. If you do want it to line up a little bit, this is one of the few times with improv work that we use pins. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to get a pin, and I know I have pins here. There we go. You either want to use, and it'll be hard to focus, the dressmaker's pins or the glass-headed pins. It's not wanting to focus for us. Or a dressmaker pin, which, see, this has the small glass head. This has almost no head. There. This is not the time to use these big flat or flower-headed pins. Okay, we want something that's going to kind of disappear for us, because what we're going to do is we're going to pin along the intersection here and mimic a sewing line so that it helps us position things. So I always like to place it with this facing towards me and then my block on top. Now I'm going to guess where this needs to go for the first time. So I'm eyeballing, thinking, hey, that looks good. I'm going to flip it over so that this part is lined up right here. And I'm going to place that pin on what will be the 1/4 inch seam line there. Okay, and then I'm going to flip that over, and voila, we've air quoted that, sewn it. Now look what happened. That is off. I don't have a nice line going here. So I'm going to want to shift this upwards. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take the pin out and I'm going to shift it a little bit. Again, I'm doing this, it's all eyeball. You get better the more you do them, I promise. And then we're going to flip that over again and go, okay, does that one work? Yeah, actually it does. I like the way that works. So that one works for me. Now, does it mean I pin the whole thing? You can. You absolutely can. I'm not. But what I will do is I'm just going to, instead of just still starting at the top, I'm going to kind of pretend pin so that I know where I need to start. But you can actually pin. The other thing you can do is you can sew from your pin. You can sew from your pin down this way and then sew from your pin the other way. Both work. In fact, that's what I'll do because I let go. I'm going to sew from my pin down and then I'll sew from my pin the other way. So it's a little bit more work on these ones. But if you really want that to line up, this is the way to do it. Oh, I have an extra thread there. There we go. Okay, so do not sew over this pin, right? You really don't want to do that. There. So we just start and go down. Again, we're only worrying about lining up the little bit in front of us as we go. Stop and adjust as necessary. As always, I see I have a bit more of a flare on the bottom, so this one's taking just a little bit more fiddling, but that's totally fine. Still not taking us that long to sew this block. Okay, I am going to not use a spider because I'm going to be starting in the middle again, so there's no point to having a spider. So I have the one side done. I'm going to trim my threads. Right, I have half the block sewn, but not the other half. So I'm going to go ahead and do the other half. This time I'm going to sew from the other side, just because I'm starting in the middle. And it just logically makes sense to have your fabric on this side and not there. It's totally fine to do that. I overlapped my seams, so I'm not worried about like doing a start and stop knot or anything like that. They're just going to hold each other. So same thing, I'm just going down, adjusting things as I go. Now I can throw that spider in because I'm done. All right, trim those threads. Do it now so it's done. You don't have to worry about it later. And we're going to go ahead and I'm going to press that. You know the rule. We always wait for the big reveal till after that final press. Oh yeah, that worked great. I'm happy with that. So give this a really great press and then I'll show you. And hopefully you'll be just as happy with yours. All right, ta-da! There is our X block. Right, let's get rid of all this extra stuff that's distracting. And we have our X marks the spot block. Right, if you want to go ahead and square this up or at least trim it so that you can have a better idea, right? I'm going to place my ruler on here. So I'm looking like I can get, you know, about a 9-inch block when all is said and done, which I'm totally fine with. I didn't want it too big. So you can play with the ruler, like you could have it be there. If I decide I don't like my flare, I can trim it really small. I could trim it more on one side than the other. Those are all your own personal design decisions. But I'm going to go with that because that gives me 9 inches. Hold my ruler, go up. I'm right-handed, so I'm going to go up on the right, and I'm going to go across right to left. And I've got nice fresh cuts there. Rotate that block around. Remember, you really want to make sure you're well pressed before you do this. Now I'm going to line up on that 9-inch mark on my ruler, on my fresh cuts here, and repeat. Go up and then across. It's an X. It can go in either direction, but there is my X marks the spot block. So what do you think, folks? That's a fun one, hey? There's our ladies. We didn't say hi to them earlier. We can say hi to them now. Hello, ladies. And I will flip you around to check out the X block. Isn't that fun? It's loads of fun. I think it's fun. I'll have to do my abstract version added in there. Gotta figure out what color I want to use next. I used purple here, so I don't know if I want to use purple again. So we'll figure it out. But now I have my X marks the spot block. Works nicely with my compass, with my booby trap block. What else did I have there? I had my volcano block. So many fun blocks as we make our treasure map in this Quilters Playcation Adventure Sewalong 2023 version of things. Now, a couple of announcements before I go for those of you watching the video as I top up my tea. A couple of things that are coming up. We do have a couple of Quilters Playcation events, some parties coming up. The first one coming up at the end of October is our Scrap Sparkler party. I've been making these fun little blocks in rainbow order. I think a great version of these actually would be to pick a really dark background, like a navy blue, deep purple, or combinations of blue, purples, and blacks. Ooh, I like that idea. With whites and golds and lights, so that the scraps really do sparkle. But we're going to play around with all those little fun scraps and create little mini blocks to have on there. So that's at the end of October. And then a few weeks later, we are going to be doing another Scandi Village party. This is always a popular one. It's a popular block. It's super easy, super fun. Hang out, come and play. That's the whole point, right? That is the whole point. So we have those two events coming up. And then I just wanted to let you know that I have decided I am absolutely doing the Adventure Sewalong for 2024 as well, because I came up with an idea that has me super excited. We're going to go back to weekly. for 2024 because I've designed that many blocks that we can use. And I think it's going to be really, really fun. We'll hear more details about that towards the end of this year, but I just wanted to give you a heads up. We're coming back live in 2024 for the Quilters Playcation Adventure Sewalong, but we're going to go back to weekly for that one. So we'll have our treasure map, and then we can move right into some really fun things with that next Adventure Sewalong. So stay tuned for all of that. I hope you have a lovely day, week, month, really, because we'll be back here in a month. I hope you have enjoyed today's adventure Sewalong, where we created the X for our treasure map. I'm realizing my treasure map is going to be enormous, but it'll be a good bed-size quilt, which I think will be really, really fun. I'll have to find a good kid in my life who deserves that. Everyone, who am I talking about? Everyone deserves a quilt, but who will appreciate the treasure map. How about that? So that's what we've got going on. Month 8. My name is Cheryl Arkison. You are joining me here for the Quilters Playcation Adventure Sewalong live on YouTube, recorded for everybody so that they can watch it at their own convenience. I will see you on Instagram, on the blog. Find me everywhere with my name, Cheryl Arkison, or at Quilters Playcation. Take care, everybody. Have an excellent day.